tuned into InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, a video podcast series. Our episode starts right now. Here's your host, Dominique Vale.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, where you can check in for your dose of stigma-breaking, empowerment-filling, humor-loving life hacks and motivation tips for all of the medically adultish people in your life. I'm Dominique Vale, the founder of InvisiYouth, and today we are at Season 2, Episode 26. And I cannot be more excited to bring on this guest. I've already mentioned to her I slightly fangirled out when we were able to get her on our show, so I'm really excited to have her on as our guest for Episode 26. She is not only the big brains behind one of your most beloved disability activism organizations, but she's also been a leading advocate for young adults with disabilities, so I'm really thrilled to have her on the show. I'm talking about the CEO and founder of Diversability, Tiffany Yu. Now, Tiffany has an award-winning social enterprise which works to rebrand disability through the power of community and storytelling, and is really able to have this international reach with a lot of young people who have disability, and then that spectrum crossing over with chronic illness and disability. So a lot of reasons why our international network of young people have been able to gravitate towards Diversability is that amazing storytelling and virtual element of this enterprise as well. So I'm really happy to get to have Tiffany on and sort of bring that international flair to the work that we do as well. But I have to say, Tiffany's resume, if you guys are watching, I have very tiny font on her bio because Tiffany has an amazing resume. It is so fantastic. She has used her own personal experience living with brachial plexus palsy, which is a nerve damage in her right arm after a car accident, along with a lot of her diverse professional experience and her collegiate education, to bring diversability of challenging the exclusion that is within the disability community, and bringing it into a very sort of front factor, top level discussion of the diverse ways of us being able. So what I also love is Tiffany has some really cool accolades. She was named one of the 100 most influential Asian Americans in 2017, and this year in 2019, she is California Miss Amazing Queen and uses her platform as an ambassador for women and girls with disabilities. So as a female founder myself, I thoroughly enjoy that platform of Tiffany's. She also is the founder of the Awesome Foundation Disability Chapter, which has awarded over $30,000 in micro grants for disability projects, and uses her years of experience running Diversability to be recently appointed to the San Francisco mayor, to the Mayor's Disability Council, which is such a fantastic thing to be able to do, where she is in California now with San Francisco. Tiffany's been able to speak at TED Talks you can find her on. She's been featured in Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Marie Claire, and uses her stellar social media platform to reshape this perception of disability and really shows all of the varieties of ways that inclusion can be possible. So everyone, I want to welcome Tiffany to the show. Tiffany, how are you?
Doing well. How are you? That was a lot.
Right? That's what I said. It is very tiny font on your bio. It's the smallest font I've had for a guest so far because your bio is so amazing.
Well, I'm excited that we finally are able to connect.
Yes, of course. I'm so excited to have you on the show and for us to get to chat a lot about disability awareness and all of the wonderful ways that Diversability and your own platform have been able to bring inclusion and diversity into our community. So I'm really excited to get to chat with you on that. I know our guests will be really excited to listen to this. And I'm going to just jump right in and let all of our guests get to know you a bit better with our segment called Remember the Last Time.
Remember the last time? Do you remember the last time? Remember?
With Remember the Last Time, this is pretty much like the title. I'm going to be asking some rapid-fire questions to Tiffany about her remembering the last time she did different things. So, Tiffany, what is the last Instagram account you remember following?
The last Instagram account I remember following was this morning, a woman named Minda Dentler, who is the first wheelchair user to, I believe, complete a triathlon.
Oh, amazing. We love an adaptive sport moment, so that is amazing. I love that. What about the last time you saw chronic illness or disability represented in TV or film and you thought it was a really good representation?
Actually, sometime this week or as of yesterday, someone shared a video that was created by Jubilee Media around disability. And Jubilee, I believe, creates these YouTube series that kind of bring to the forefront difficult conversations around privilege, identity, intersectionality, etc. And so it's about a 15 to 20 minute YouTube video featuring disabled people and their perceptions around what it means to be disabled, if they find it offensive, if people label them that way, etc. So I'm really excited, at least on a micro level. I'm seeing a lot more kind of disability influencers, a lot more visibility of our community through some of these other digital platforms.
Yeah, no, I love that. And like you said, it's sort of not even just more inclusive representation, but accurate representation of bringing individuals with the actual chronic illnesses or disabilities to be in the forefront of the storytelling, which I know is such an amazing and necessary thing when you're sort of sharing the disability platform with other people.
Yeah. I also just realized that I don't know if you heard that, but I think I have text messages on my...
I didn't hear anything.
Can you ask your audio guy?
He's shaking his head. No.
Oh, he didn't hear anything either. No. Okay.
Okay.
Just cut that part. Sorry.
We'll edit that part out. There we go. Okay, what was the last time Diversability had a first?
Yeah. Actually, I think it was it was in September. So we did a partnership with a restaurant chain in Canada called Regrub, and we actually created these co-branded shirts together where some of their employees will wear the shirts that has the Diversability logo and the Regrub logo on the sleeve. And it was the first time that we had kind of thought about using that as another way to kind of spark conversation around disability, share more about what we're doing as well. So that was a really exciting thing that we did.
Oh, I love that. And shout out to Canada. They're such a great group to work with.
Yeah, but I think it also kind of opened up pathways. We had never thought about doing kind of like branded swag. But yeah, at least for me, I just really love what our logo represents. Mm-hmm. My hope is that, Diversability as a logo, as a brand, like everyone can take ownership over it.
Oh, absolutely. And as another person who knows and looking at logos, yours is so immediate, recognizing it for people. So it is really just a well done, sort of visually a really fantastic logo. So I love that co-branding idea as well. And for a restaurant to kind of bring that in, that's a really creative way to, like you said, to get conversations moving forward. What was the last time you cooked a really good meal for yourself?
As someone who doesn't really cook that much, last night I cooked some noodles for myself. But honestly, last night, I guess the reason why last night sticks into my mind is I have been traveling a lot. If anyone follows me on social media, they will know that. And so this is the first week that I've kind of been in San Francisco and had a chance to settle down. And there were a couple evening commitments that I loosely had, but decided to kind of take a self-care night for myself and make my own dinner and stay in and catch up on other things. So I will say it wasn't necessarily the food that I ate, but what was associated with it that made it memorable.
I like that. That's a good way of phrasing it. I really like that. Next time I'm going to sort of make some soup or cereal for dinner if I'm taking a self-care moment. I'm going to focus on my moment versus what I actually made for myself. What about, I wanted to kind of go in as well, what about the last time you were at a public speaking event? I know you do a lot with public speaking and motivational speaking, so where was the last platform you did something with?
Sure, the last one was Tech Inclusion, which is a really great conference, 5 years in the making now, that brings together people passionate about making this industry more diverse and more inclusive. And I was asked to moderate a panel on building equity, allyship, and empowerment within our community and within our community in relation to tech as well. So, yeah, that was in September. I'm not quite sure when. Hopefully there will be other opportunities. But I guess I'll also say, I think along these lines of self-care, it's kind of my theme for the year. I've actually scaled back a lot on kind of doing more outward-facing public speaking things and hoping to kind of lift up more of our community members to take on more of that kind of in the idea of empowering other people who have stories they want to share. Because as you know, my story is very visible and it's very out there. So yeah. I think to the extent that we can feature more of our community members, that's a win to me as well. I don't always need to be the one being really visible.
No, but I love that you sort of calling that inclusive, not even just in the tech community where you were saying you did that public speaking, but then also, like you said, to bring in more speakers to sort of follow in your footsteps of the way that you do such fantastic diversity discussions within the disability community, and then even showing that the different branches that bringing more disability awareness can go into different projects in different companies as well, sort of bringing more faces to Diversability along with yourself, which is a really wonderful sort of connection to be able to do. And then last one, I have to, as a fellow female founder as yourself, what was the last moment you felt like you had a really sort of pat on the back female founder boss lady moment with either Diversability or some of your other projects?
Sure. Wow. Honestly, the whole month of September, I feel like I've been soaring. And the last week of September, I was in New York, and as a side event to the United Nations General Assembly meeting that was happening, there's something that's called Global Goals Week in relation to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that were set in 2015 for what we want to see in 2030. And I got invited to attend as part of a program called Goalkeepers, which was started by the Gates Foundation to come and represent our disability work, really better understand how disability is perceived globally as well. And, it was the first time that I had felt imposter syndrome in a long time. Imposter syndrome is this idea of like feeling that you don't belong. But I remember, and I talked to a lot of our community members about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And oftentimes a lot of it's about script. So, it was someone else who invited you to this gathering. It was someone else who felt that your opinion or your presence or your visibility mattered enough to exist in this space. So it's not really up to you to decide whether or not you belong there or not because someone else had invited you.
Yeah.
For me, I think being able to kind of coexist in that environment with people who were, I met people who were tackling female genital mutilation in their areas, which is something growing up in the Western world I can't even imagine and I can't even fathom. And then people who were tackling mental health in Nigeria or other places where it's way more stigmatized than here in the U.S. So, it was the whole gamut of people who are working toward the Sustainable Development Goals. I felt super honored to be there. I did feel like a boss because I was like, I don't even know how I'm here, but I'm here and I'm going to own it. And then the last thing I'll say is that it really inspired and motivated me to want to tie more of my work to the Sustainable Development Goals. Because I will say, so goal number 10 it's reducing inequalities. And a lot of them are pretty broad as well. And I would say a lot of the work that both you and I are doing kind of fit under that umbrella.
Yeah.
And then goal number 5 is gender equality. So the fact that we're both female entrepreneurs fits into that. So it's figuring out, how can we tie more of what we're doing to a global movement that's happening toward 2030.
Yeah, no, I really love that you said that too, that it really is sort of all-encompassing, and Diversability and InvisiYouth both being these sort of global networks of organizations. Like you said, it's really taking the work that we're familiar with and being from the States and then seeing all of these other communities and similar communities in different countries as well, and seeing the ways in which they're able to try and be game changers for similar topics as well, based on, like you said, different cultural norms or in their own societies, how these different sort of diversity issues coming forward and bringing those inequalities in different capacities with each sort of situation in each country's sort of cultural and socioeconomic position as well.
Yeah. And there was, I guess I'll add that there was a session at Goalkeepers that was about debunking bias. And what I thought was really interesting was that, as people who kind of live in this world, we're used to the language to use, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And talking with some of the other attendees, I think it was really kind of groundbreaking for them to be able to participate in that conversation, because it taught them the right language to use, but it also taught them that we are all biased, and bias in a way is almost like a choice, similar to inclusion, right? Mm-hmm. So when we walk into an environment, we know that we're going to be walking in with whatever mental shortcuts we have, and it's up to us to decide if we want to explore whether we're looking for a confirmation of that, or whether or not we want to kind of show in, knowing that we have whatever biases, open up the slate and have the conversations.
Yeah, no, I really love that. And it's a perfect transition into our next segment because of what you had said, sort of bringing all of these amazing game changers into sort of one room and all of you getting to converse with each other, especially with a lot of other business women as well. You get to talk about how you can break the glass ceiling. So that will be our next segment we're going into with Tiffany, and it's called Break That Glass Ceiling.
Break that glass ceiling. Break that glass ceiling.
You guys know Break That Glass Ceiling is one of my favorite segments, and of course with Tiffany, this was the one I definitely made sure we wanted to do. We are talking about not only the different stigmas and misconceptions that are our figurative glass ceiling within the chronic illness and disability community, but showing different ways on an individual and group level that we can find and crack that glass ceiling. So even just as a starting point, I wanted to kind of ask you what you felt were the main or sort of primary pillars of that disability glass ceiling that so many young people are facing.
Sure. I guess it's like twofold, and I really do believe that most of these questions can be addressed from both within the disability community and outside of the disability community. So within the disability community, I think that we really need to take ownership of the word disability and really be proud and strong and courageous in those narratives. And so what that means is that we have a large portion of our community who doesn't identify as disabled, which in a way further perpetuates stigma around the word. And so to the extent that, and you know what, a lot of it is a journey. And for me personally, it took me over 10 years before I identified as disabled, before I kind of came out in a way with my own disability narrative and really trying to better understand what it looked like in the context of my whole life.
Yeah.
So that's the first, is really, I think, our own internal self-dialogue. So what are the things that we're telling ourselves? What are the stories we're telling ourselves about our own disabilities and how we exist in the world? And how much of that is perpetuated or reinforced by media? And then I say for the non-disabled world, a lot of it is around false perceptions of what our abilities are. So I believe that, and in a way it's a little bit unfair that we have this one word that describes a lot of conditions that have nothing to do with each other, are kind of unrelated. Yeah. So for someone like me who has a nerve injury, I don't know what it's like to be deaf, or to be blind, or to be a wheelchair user on a daily basis, or to have a chronic illness, or have something where I wake up and I don't know if I can show up or not. And so we have a lot of work to do in terms of educating the non-disabled world, or the non-disabled world, to adopt some of these more stronger, empowered narratives.
Yeah, and I really love that you said that too, because it's something I definitely related to. It took me, I have chronic illnesses that came from a sports injury, but then had more genetic chronic illnesses that ended up flaring because of that injury and through my teens and my 20s. But it as well, when people would ask me if I identified as chronically ill, it took quite a few years after my injury for me to associate that term with myself and even mention it in conversation, because like you had mentioned, there's such a generic sort of stigma of that, meaning I I lacked a capability of being in school or socializing or having activities because my health hindered me based on the day or what my flare-ups were doing or how it affected different organs in my body at different points. So it was my own sort of internal sort of bias of I don't want to associate as chronically ill because then I think I'm not capable because other people would tell me that. So then me sort of taking a positive term on having that as I have chronic illnesses and sort of using it in a positive mindset and using it as a tool for my own capability. It was like you said, sort of taking control of the narrative and using it in a way that is a strengthening tool for your own sort of position in the world.
Yeah, and I will say the other thing I think a lot about is how can we reconnect on our shared humanity? And I think a lot about how dehumanized our community is so much of the time. So to say that we can only kind of live in these pity, victim, shame narratives is another way that we're dehumanized. That is to also say that to always live in a place where we're strong and powerful and happy is also a form of dehumanization.
Yeah.
And so it's how can we really celebrate the human experience that it is to be disabled? It's not only one type of narrative.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And like you said, too, I know one thing, I had actually a mental health advocate say it to me as a phrasing when I spoke about sort of my own chronic illness journey. And they said, oh, well, a big thing that of how they look at it within the mental health community is there's such a lack of discussion publicly because people feel a sense of internal shame about their own mental health journey. But she says, if you leave something in the bottom and you leave it with this shame, you're only feeding that darkness because it's not being put into the front. It's not being put in the light, and you're not allowing sort of that to die out. So you're maintaining that sort of internal struggle and then sort of social construct struggle with it as well. So it was something that really stuck with me of sort of pushing even my own comfort levels and pushing with InvisiYouth as well to allow more young people to sort of choose the style they like to frame their own health in what they love to do and then use that as sort of their toolkit of how they can feel empowered in their daily structure with a chronic illness or disability.
Well, I think what's interesting about invisible illnesses and hidden disabilities is this idea that you can choose how you want to show up.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, to be honest, I think a lot of the stigma around why people who have invisible illnesses don't share more of their stories is that they see how people who have visible disabilities are treated and the stigma that's associated with that. And so it's just like, we kind of need like stigma breaking all around.
Yeah.
And we need people who have physical, visible disabilities to be kind of embraced within society to open up more pathways for people who have invisible disabilities to want to share their narratives as well.
Yeah, and I really kind of even going off of that too, what would be some tips for that you would give other young people sort of on an individual sort of their own inner dialogue or even in their own independent life of ways that they can sort of combat that negative misconception of them living and building a life with a chronic illness or disability?
Yeah, I mean, one hashtag that I have been really proud of go viral when I call myself disabled. And I believe it was started by Zarifa. Actually, I'm going to start that answer over again.
Okay.
And if it's okay, can I look up who started it? Because I think appropriating things is very important.
Yeah.
To the right person. There's a hashtag that I have been following recently called hashtag when I call myself disabled. And what I really love about the hashtag is the fact that people within the disability community are sharing stories of what it means to them when they call themselves disabled. And what I love about the hashtag is the fact that I'm seeing people from within our community take ownership of words that have been, I guess, appropriated onto us with different meanings than what we want them to mean.
Yeah.
And so what I would recommend is, my big belief is how can I take control of my narrative before other people attribute their own biases to me? first.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, and so I got into this car accident 22 years ago. It's taken at least, 10 to 15 years before I really saw what an asset my disability was to my life,
mm-hmm.
and how much my disability contributed to my own life. So it is a journey. I mean, one of the conversations that I had in one of these panels that I moderated was around the idea of safe spaces versus brave spaces. And in a lot of diversity and inclusion conversations, we talk a lot about how we don't really use the term safe space anymore because our space is really safe.
Yeah.
And you never know what the parameters of safety are going to be for anyone at any one point in time. It's very personal.
Yeah.
But I was challenged on use of the term brave space because someone might not be ready to be brave.
Yeah.
First, just want to show up.
Yeah.
And so for me, I would love to give to say, just put yourself out of your comfort zone, put yourself so far out that you feel exploited, that you feel vulnerable in a bad way, that you feel tokenized, that you feel like you don't have safety nets.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that is a productive way of kind of sharing your story and coming into your narrative. And, I started Diversability 10 years ago. It has been an incredible ride. But the 10 years ago in 2009, when I had started it, I had been disabled for 12 years. And so this whole thing is really a journey. And it's seeing, maybe it's for you sharing little bits of your story on social media, even if your account is closed, but with your personal friends. Or maybe it's having a conversation with your family or with your close friends about the realities of what's going on in your life. And I think it's kind of just those small steps that allow you to kind of stretch that comfort zone little by little. And someone asked me recently, they said, "Hey, Tiffany, how do I make a name for myself?" And I thought it was an interesting question because I never went into this thinking that I wanted to make a name for myself.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the creation of Diversability has really paralleled my own personal journey. So, the creation of Diversability was, how can we create spaces for disabled and non-disabled people to come together and have a conversation around this lived experience? And really, that was the first time I had ever had a conversation on a more public level with my non-disabled peers, and even meeting other disabled people about what was going on in my life. And, a lot of it has always just been kind of like heads down, do the
work.
And Diversability events.
Mm-hmm.
I never have a speaking role at them. I'm always the organizer because Diversability is never about me. It's about our community members and the work that they're doing and the importance of their stories and the validity of their experiences. So for some reason, someone decided that maybe I had a name for myself, or maybe it was time to allow this movement to have more visibility. And sometimes some of these movements do need a leader or do need a couple of leaders. And because of that, I'm extremely grateful. But yeah, I think it's this whole idea of like, start small. If you need a little bit of inspiration, check out the hashtag when I call disabled.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that. Yeah,
just so, yeah.
No, I really and I'm happy to have you as one of the trailblazers in this community as well. So I would have definitely dropped that DM as well if I was a young person sort of trying to figure out my space in the chronic illness and disability community. And I love how you said that too, that it really is sort of growing your own comfort in terms of what your scale of bravery can look different for other people. We'll always say sort of celebrate the small and the big wins at every day, whether that's your own sort of personal health journey versus your activism and your own career journey as well. It's been 11 years since my injury. In December it'll be 11 years. And anytime I climb a flight of stairs, I still like give myself a mental little like hurrah, because I remember when I couldn't couldn't climb the stairs because of my health issues in my leg and not being able to walk well. So for me, those are like even little celebrations so many years later. I still do. Meanwhile, I celebrate when I'm able to do things like this and get to speak with people like yourself, or doing fundraiser events or speaking events that are more larger scale on sort of the diverse young people with chronic illness. And so, like you said, it's really celebrating all the different types of bravery that you get to bring with talking about your health struggles in any capacity is a wonderful way of cracking that misconception other people might see.
Yeah, I guess I'll add 2 other things that I just thought of. And one is I love this idea of kind of like DMing people.
Yes.
So, I will get a lot of direct messages around things like, hey, like I have a similar injury to you. What has dating been like?
Yes.
Or, hey, like, do you have any ideas of where to find professional mentors? And I think, some of this doesn't always need to be so public or so visible.
Yeah.
I very intentionally chose since 2016 that I wanted to lead with vulnerability, and that's how I show up in the world, which I know doesn't work for everyone. So even just, I think, finding those people that you admire. And I just love the way that social media has made people so accessible.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I'll say is I'm a really big believer in like affirmations and words. Mm-hmm. And so I did post this on my Instagram a little while ago, but I used to have a necklace. There's an organization called the Giving Keys. Yeah. And what they do is they employ people experiencing homelessness or transitioning out of homelessness, and they create these keys that have these words on them. And for the past couple of years, I have had a necklace that has had the word believe on it. And for me, I just loved kind of like the visibility of like having a physical thing that had a word on it. And every single year I have a hashtag for my year as well. It's just a reminder to me that like every single time I wore my believe necklace, I was like, hey, Tiffany, like I want you to know that like I believe your story matters, and believe in yourself. Believe kind of has two meanings, or whatever it means to whoever owns that word. And finally, actually in September, I decided that I didn't really need that word anymore. And I just mailed it out to someone who was following me on Instagram, who told me what that word meant to her, and the whole idea behind the Giving Keys. And I'm hoping to do more things like this as well. Is, how can we pay forward the word that we need anymore? So I have paid forward believe. I'm trying to think what my new word is going to be. But yeah, I think that they're just, and sometimes you can buy these shirts that say like love. Maybe if you want to buy a shirt that says Diversability, you can do that too.
Shameless plug.
But I have a lot of like kind of positive affirmation shirts. Like just thinking off the top of my head, I have one that says make bold moves. I have a wild feminist shirt. I have one that says unstoppable together. I don't know. It's just like when you wear these things, it's almost like kind of like a temporary tattoo where it's like, I'm wearing it because maybe I don't believe it yet, but I want to. But the fact that I'm going around being an ambassador, like the fact that when you wear something that says something on it, you're making a statement to the world.
Yes.
And so, yeah, so I really love that. So maybe you don't need to be so vocal about what you're going through, but it can also just be like aspirationally, this is where I want to be. And I believe that I can get there. So I'm going to wear a shirt that says it, or wear a piece of jewelry or something.
Yeah, and I really like it's sort of self-affirmation in that way of not only sort of instilling more sort of positive and powerful thoughts on your own daily health and how you're able to adapt with any sort of chronic illness or disability you may have, but then also in your network of healthy, able-bodied friends and family, like you said, even wearing the key that says believe, or wearing a shirt from an organization or a charity that has different affirmational slogans on it, or it has the charity's name and their mission statement on it. You're showing your own network of friends and family that don't have the same health experiences as you, sort of giving them a peek into your life and having that conversation, that door be open for them to learn more things about your own daily journey, as well as for them to be more inclusive and have their eyes open to a lot of aspects of sort of the daily life of someone with chronic illness and disability that they can then pay forward in the work that they do outside. Which I think that's a really great ending point on that segment. And I'm really excited because now that I know Tiffany likes wearing affirmational t-shirts like I do, I know that Tiffany's going to be able to have a really fun story for me in our intermission segment. But before we get to that, I just want to, as always, thank you guys for listening and watching the InvisiYouth chat sessions. It's one of our virtual programs that we love so much. This is season 2, so we're really thankful to be able to bring this program to so many of you on all of our different audio podcast platforms and our YouTube channel to watch the show as well. You'll definitely want to see amazing Tiffany on camera, so definitely make sure you pop over to our YouTube channel if you're listening to this on a podcast. And we always say, because we're a nonprofit, all of our programming is provided for you guys, so any donation or support that you could bring means the world to us to be able to maintain our programming and leadership programming and our events that we get to provide around the world with amazing young people like yourself. So I know we have the link popping up on the screen and in our description box below, but like I always say, thank you guys so much for the love and support and activism you bring into our community every day. It makes working for and with InvisiYouth charity so much fun on my end and for everyone that works with me as well behind the scenes. So after that little intermission moment, we're going to go into my favorite segment of the show, which is when Tiffany gets to tell me a story with So That One Time.
So that one time.
So the title of the story is called So That One Time I Got Artwork on My Splint.
Awesome. I love it already.
And so I have what's called a brachial plexus injury, as you mentioned in my intro. And the brachial plexus is a series of nerves in the back of my neck that send signals from my brain to my arm. And so as a result of having a brachial plexus injury, since it's been 20 years, have like a little bit of muscle atrophy. Mm-hmm. The hand has kind of hyperextended in a way. My wrist kind of has a life of its own. So about a year ago, about a year and a half ago, I started wearing a splint. And so the splint helps just be more functional on a day-to-day level. It was given to me by an occupational therapist. And it helps so that my wrist isn't just doing its own thing all the time and some of the extension that is happening over time.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that the first time I got my splint, so this is 2018, I cried because my splint reminded me of what it was like to be a 9-year-old girl and to kind of to be a 9-year-old girl who now had to wear a splint, and it was always in a sling. And the splint is interesting because it's customized to your hand. So they end up using this strange plasticky material that if you put it in hot water, it'll mold to your hand. Okay. But then it has this pink lining and this Velcro, and I'm just like, man, after 20 years, there haven't been any exciting things that have happened in splint design. And for the next couple of kind of public appearances that I had to make, I would always make comments about how I think prosthetics look super cool, yes, but why can't splints look more cool? And so some people had proposed, why don't you go to a 3D printer, etc. And what I think is interesting is I really need to get a new splint, progressing or muscle, etc. So this year, in April, I got a new splint. And my friend Jeff, who actually has his own podcast called Talk Human to Me, shameless plug.
Great title, by the way.
I know. He has an artist friend, and he was like, "Hey, Tiffany, do you want to see if my artist friend, whose name is Forrest, do you want me to see if Forrest Stearns can put some artwork on your splint?" And I was like, "Oh,
awesome!
That sounds pretty cool." And he's like, "Let me know what you want to put on it." So okay, well, I'm going to be wearing this splint all the time, so I want to put something on it that I guess is kind of appropriate. So to just paint it all black, or I was thinking something whimsical, or cherry blossoms to celebrate my my Taiwanese American heritage, or my Asian heritage. Sorry. But then I kind of took a step back, and I'm like, if my splint is going to make a statement to the world, and you and I have talked about this, about the having visible things And so I really believe that if people are going to stare, make it worth their while. That's a Harry Winston quote.
Love that quote.
Like, if people are going to stare at my hand, I want to tell them something. So I told my friend Jeff, I was like, you know what? I think I want the word proud to be on there somewhere. And I also want to see, like, what if we can have, like, a little Asian girl who represents 9-year-old Tiffany hugging an elephant. So a couple months ago, I got my splint back, and I will show it to you. And what it is it is 9-year-old Tiffany hugging an elephant with the word proud. And I think you can see the word proud.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm trying to see if I can see it. So right here is 9-year-old Tiffany. This is my face. My back is here. Yeah, it kind of looks like a Tim Burton-esque type 9-year-old girl.
Love.
And then my arm is sprawled across one of these Velcro straps. And here is the eye of the elephant. This is my thumb here. It just spawns all the way to the bottom and like circle. But I love telling people about my splint now because it's, I don't know, it's so cool. And then I can share Forrest's work. And so that's my story with my splint. When I first got it, I was really sad because it just reminded me of, you know, all of the hard things that had happened to me when I was 9. But then I'm like, if I'm going to wear a splint, why not have some fun with it? And why not make a statement around how I feel? Oh, so the 9-year-old girl, the reason why it's the 9-year-old girl hugging the elephant is because in some of the talks that I would first give around diversibility, I would talk about how I always felt like my arm or disability was the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Fellow disability advocate Sean Horn would add to that, and she said, we just need to hug the elephant.
Oh,
so
my
the
God,
reason
I
why
love that.
I have this as my as the artwork on my splint is because I just feel like 9-year-old Tiffany, 31-year-old Tiffany, all of us need to hug this elephant in the room. How can we embrace the things that are visible that have happened to us, or even the invisible things that have happened to us as well? And then the word proud is, you know, I actually revisit this word a lot because I think about how my outcomes could have been so much different based on what happened to me when I was 9 and a lot of, I think, the disability narratives that flood the media.
Yeah.
And I feel extremely proud that I am a full-time disability advocate and that I can use my voice and whatever power and whatever visibility I do have to help lift other members of our community up.
I love that. And I love that you said, too, that this is it's obviously from a physical perspective, like you said, it is the elephant in the room. It's what people can see, but that you embracing it in such an artistic and creative way is something that, like you said, if people are going to look, give them something that has a story, that's something you can engage a conversation with. And I'm making sure definitely on when this episode goes out and we post on social media, this is why we're a kindred spirit, because the background on my phone is a little girl hugging an elephant. So, which right when you said that, I went, oh my God, I have to have a side by side with my cell phone cover, which has our logo on the one side, and then my actual screen is a little girl hugging an elephant. So,
beautiful. Yeah. So and I thought what was interesting was I didn't know how it would be executed on my splint, but it was just done in such a way, you know, with the arm on the Velcro strap. It just so beautiful. Really and is. Honestly, like, I'm really proud of my splint now.
Yeah. Oh, I would be telling everybody about it. I love that. And kind of going off of telling everybody about your pretty amazing artwork on your splint, we're going to go into a talking segment that we always get to talk about the different chat up ways we can talk about activism and chronic illness and disability and engage that conversation to create some change. So Tiffany are going to go into the segment of Chat Me Up.
Chat me up.
Hey, wanna chat?
With Chat Me Up, this is a segment where we get to talk about all of our different ways of getting conversation started, or as I like to say, the chat up phrases and advice that Tiffany and I can give for the chronic illness and disability community for embracing our health struggles, as Tiffany said, hugging that elephant in the room and being able to engage the healthy, able-bodied community as well and having them embrace this discussion too, which I know is something super important to Tiffany's work with Diversability and with us as well at InvisiYouth. So kind of going off of that, one of the things I know you mentioned at the top of the show that I wanted to circle back on was a lot of the sort of misconceptions or the negative impact that comes from having a chronic illness or disability is that internal dialogue of feeling that something is wrong, that your illness or disability is a burden or too much to handle. And it's that internal narrative that sort of can perpetuate a lot of issues that young people especially will deal with as how they grow and evolve with their chronic illness or disability. So I wanted to kind of ask, what would be some tips that you would give of that sort of talking out those inner thoughts of feeling like you're a burden or those sort of negative stigmas of having a health struggle?
Yeah, I guess I'll say two things. So number one is I actually think language is very important. Mm-hmm. So interestingly enough, I believe that the opposite of disabled is non-disabled because, and I use that in how I talk about the disabled and non-disabled world because there actually are people who are disabled and actually would fall under the term able-bodied, right? And so that's just something from my own learning that I've learned because I used to use able-bodied as the opposite of disabled as well. And then I realized, well, what we're doing by using able-bodied in a way is further perpetuating that disability only looks like a disabled body.
No, I really like that.
And so, but along those lines too, I think, I think on the topic of language, like I try not to use terms like, I don't think anyone wants to be impaired or anyone wants to suffer from something. But I do want to acknowledge that for people who have certain types of disabilities that may be debilitating, sometimes, you have your on and your off days. Yeah. As we all do, because that's part of being human. So I think for me, part of changing the narrative, at least for me, was what are the words that I'm using to talk about my own disability? Am I framing it in the way of being a victim of my narrative? Do I feel like I'm impaired? Am I talking about myself like I'm less than? Like what stereotypes am I perpetuating myself? And so I think to be able to kind of like take a step back and and all of this, of course, is always a learning journey. Yeah. And so interestingly enough, there are people in the mental illness community who define what they have as mental illnesses. And I asked them, what do you think if I use mental health condition? Because I don't want anyone to feel like they're ill. Yeah. And then they were like, Tiffany, everyone has mental health, right? All of us have mental health. It's a part of our overall well-being. Yeah. And so when you call something a mental health condition, you're kind of like softening the fact that people do have diagnosed things that they are working through that impacts their daily life. And so there are people within the mental illness community who prefer mental illness. And so language is always so tricky because you have to go to the person who is affected and ask them what they prefer. But what was interesting is like in my own journey of trying to use more empowering language around how I talk about all of these things, I also realized that some people prefer visually impaired. Some people prefer, being mentally ill. And so also making sure that I can adjust as necessary to what makes them most comfortable and how they self-identify. Yeah. And then the second thing, I guess, is I forgot.
My brain fogging is jumping over.
So your question was about how we can start to address our own internal dialogue. Yeah. So I'll start over on my second point. So my second point is to actually just have fun with it. Yeah. So remember, I grew up as someone who was hyper self-reliant, like overly self-reliant, wanted to be so independent, wanted to do everything by myself. And to be honest, to be human is to be connected. Like part of being human is our desire for connection and acknowledging the interdependence of our relationships. And so I am challenging myself anytime anyone asks me to offer help related to them seeing my splint, I have to respond, yes, please. And in the past, I've always defaulted to, oh, no, thank you, even when I probably do need help, but I'm just so proud of being independent and I don't know. But I think what it does is it's forcing, and by responding, yes, please, both people in the scenario feel better.
Yeah.
You know, so when someone offers me a seat on the bus, even though, you know, I'm only riding one stop, I'm just like, yes, please, okay. And then I get to sit for one stop, and they feel better because maybe they felt like I needed the seat more than they did. And for me, it's really this idea that, like, everyone is well-intentioned. So they may ask things that seem offensive, or they may do things that may make you kind of question a little. But at the end of the day, I like to believe that no one is operating out of ill will. So I think part of the dialogue also comes from, you know, acknowledging the interdependence of our relationships. Like asking for help is amazing. And it's a message. Maybe my next word will be help or ask for help.
Yeah, I like that.
To work on as well. But what it has done is, I think by responding, yes, please, when people offer me help, is that it is acknowledging that there are certain things that I can't do. And that's okay. There are certain things that non-disabled people can't do. And how can I remind myself that human connection, interdependence is part of any human experience.
Yeah.
And I think that by having kind of this yes, please challenge for myself, it's allowed me to change my own internal dialogue of how I see what's happened to me.
Yeah, and I love that you said that too, because that was the big thing. Was the one thing I wrote down was it is sort of an internal, in my own mind, or a lot of the young adults that'll sort of come into InvisiYouth, I always have to remind them, you're not asking for more assistance just because you would like more assistance. You're asking for a lot of things because then it sort of puts you at a physical equal playing field to what your non-disabled counterpart would have. So you're really just giving yourself an equal footing to work at the same capacity they are. And you would, if the shoe were on the other foot, you would probably want to extend that help or support to somebody else if they were in your shoes. So I always will even say it that way of, sometimes we do have that internal of, oh, they're only wanting to ask for help, or they only want to offer things for me because I have a chronic illness or a disability, where sometimes I would on my end, even though I have a physical chronic illness, there are days where I'll just reach to my sort of healthy non-disabled counterpart and ask to them, like, oh, do you need something? Do you need help? So it wouldn't be me even asking on another end. So like you said too, really sort of inviting people to sort of be interpersonal and having that relationship with people, even in the sort of the passing of your days, is a really good tool to use to sort of embrace more of a positive mindset of sort of your physical health in those situations, or mental health as well in those different situations.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, I mean, I think what's really interesting is that burden is an emotion that kind of like plagues many people within our community. And it is something I am working through as well. Yeah. And I think, like, when I ask someone for help, they have a choice to answer yes or no. Yeah. And if they didn't want to help, they can say no. But it's like putting the ball into their court. And so if they feel like maybe I will be a burden to them, then they should say no, you know? And then if someone offers help to me and I say, yes, please, that's because they wanted to help. And so, I think for me thinking about burden, it's like, how can I get out of that? Like, when by asking someone for help, it's a question that has a yes or no response. And the person who responds can respond how they see fit. And it is okay if they say no, then you go and ask the next person. But I think to kind of just sit on an internal dialogue that we are burdened and not asking for help is, again, I think to kind of strip the humanity out a little bit to not acknowledge the interdependence that we need in our relationships.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even kind of going off of that too, I wanted to sort of switch it, because I know something you talk about quite a bit is not only sort of anyone with a chronic illness or disability, their own narrative of empowering their own language of their life with a chronic illness or disability, but it's even the outside community as well, so those that are non-disabled or healthy and air quotes of that end, how they then engage our community to be involved with them. So that's where a big thing will always get asked from a lot of siblings or boyfriends or girlfriends or even relatives or colleagues will always come into the charity or at events and say, I don't want to say the wrong thing, so then I end up saying nothing. So I don't know to ask questions or don't ask questions, so then I say nothing. So that's where I wanted to even ask your advice for the support network that we have around us of what would be sort of ways that they can initially engage themselves in somebody's chronic illness or disability discussion.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I think is kind of interesting about this whole idea of allyship is that if the basis of your relationship is only about the disability or the chronic illness, like that is a very odd place to start any relationship. Yeah. Right. Unfortunately. And so, you know, for me, before I wore the splint or people who are unfamiliar with my work, it's normally probably within, you know, we'll probably be at a food buffet or something, and then we'll talk about getting food, and then it'll come up, or I'll bring it up. Well, now because I do this work full time, it always comes up. But in the past, it was always, you know, and I love the way that my friends would always ask, they would be like, hey, not sure if you feel comfortable talking about this, but blah, blah, blah. But that would come up at a point where we had already established a relationship with each other, because what I think is interesting, so my disability is associated with childhood trauma. And so the first thing that someone I don't even know is asking me to share details about my dad passing away and being a 9-year-old girl who acquired this disability and family loss and grief, like that is a very odd place to start a conversation. Yeah. I mean, I will also preface that now I wear a splint that has artwork on it, so people will be curious and ask, of course, but the artwork is on the splint because I know I'm at a place in my life where if that's the first thing you want to ask me about, I can go into it. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's also acknowledging, you know, part of the work we do at Diversability is how can we showcase the diversity of disability lived experiences. So you don't know if someone's disability is tied to trauma, or if they've had other traumatic events related to their disability, or, you know, or from birth or acquired through sports, you know, or who knows. Yeah. And so I think I really love there's a phrase like it goes with mind. Like your conversation, is it like you're punching someone in the face, or are you kind of like being gentle about how you're navigating it? Yeah. And I think I think for our allies, like we need allies more than anything else in this movement. Our non-disabled allies have access to spaces that we don't have access to. Yeah. And I think the more, for me, it's kind of like twofold. And one is, the best way to tackle bias is through real life continuous experiences with people who challenge your stereotypes. Yeah. And so the more non-disabled people get to know people within our community and get to know the diversity of our experiences, the better off we all are. Because I will often meet people who are like, Tiffany, I'm really glad that I met you or that you spoke at this event because you challenged disability looked like. I thought it would be more severe, all these other things. Yeah. And I think both you and I sharing our stories are like, how can we show that disability and chronic illness look like so many different things? Yeah. So I kind of sidebar from your original question, but I think I will say, ask the question. If the response is not what you anticipated, I would pat yourself on the back for at least asking. Yeah. And I have another challenge I have been trying with myself is, how can I say the things that I need to say without expectation of what I anticipate the response to be?
I love that.
So if you really are curious, I think you should just ask without expectation of the response. And if the person is not open to it, then don't prod further. Right? But if they seem like they want to talk more about it, then I think be open and engage with that conversation. And you will be surprised, you know, how how like fruitful that conversation will be to you. And the reason why I mentioned I followed Minda Dentler is because I saw her she gave a talk at the Moth, which is this storytelling event. And Minda, I think, was born with polio. So she uses these kind of like leg and crutches things to walk around. I'm not quite sure what the right terms are, but her talk was about becoming a mom. And it was such a human, beautiful thing. And I guess I just loved it because it was so human, right? And like, I want to be able to come to a conversation and tell you about the last bad date that I went on. And, you know, all the other things of what it means to live in this world. And so I think disability, asking the question about the disability perhaps can be an opening to a really beautiful friendship. My advice, though, would be to actually create a relationship with that person before you dig into their personal health stuff. But I also acknowledge that I think for me, telling people about the extent of what my disability looks like, both the physical manifestation of it and the trauma and healing and grief from that, for me, people know, for me being vocal about it allows people to know where they can best support. And so relationship sided, right? So if we're deprecating, then we're not allowing our allies to support us. So I think the conversation does need to be two-way. But
and I love that you said that too. It's sort of like your friends were bookending. If they had a strong inclination to ask a question about how you're capable of doing different things or how they can involve you or make something more accessible, or just out of plain curiosity about a chronic illness or disability they might know you have or might visibly see you have, it's sort of bookending your question with that. I always say it's more cushioned language of giving the power back to the person you're asking questions to, of if you don't want to answer this, it's fine, but, and then ask the question, and being okay getting a yes or no answer as the person that is sort of asking the question is important. If you want to engage with them in that sort of discussion, you have to be able to have somebody say, I just really don't want to talk about that today, or, oh, wow, we're at lunch, I really don't feel like talking about my sort of injury and all that it has done to my life in our lunch discussion. That's not really what I was going out to have a salad for, in that way. So I do think, like you said, as well, as really being open to getting either reaction from an individual is just as important as the person with a chronic illness or disability feeling comfort and confidence in what they want to disclose or discuss with you.
Yes. And I think it goes to our earlier point around asking for help, right? The response is always a choice. And someone told me recently, they were like, Tiffany, you seem really sunny. And I was like, and then I told them about my splint and the reason why I have the word proud on there. And joy is a choice as well. How we own our narratives is a choice. How we show up in the world is a choice. And so I am now very fascinated with this idea that I mentioned to you before, which is, how can I say the things I need to say or show up the way that I need to show up without expectation of how the world is going to respond? And how liberating is it to just show up in my full ridiculous self? And that is a choice. So, asking for help, asking about disability, the response is always a choice. And I think we need to be okay with a yes or with a no, or with a, let me tell you more, or I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, and I really, even kind of going off of that too, I was going to ask in terms of how you think, because a one big thing that we'll always get, especially working with a lot of teenagers, is they'll say, well, if I'm asking for a venue space, or asking friends if a restaurant they want to go to, or a date where they are going out, if it's accessible physically for them, or if it is in an inclusive environment, they say, I want to talk about this, but I don't want to feel like I'm standing on the soapbox or I'm preaching. So how do I talk about disability awareness or chronic illness activism in that network, but not preach it to somebody who is not a part of this community? And that conversation of how do you have those sort of conversations, especially as a teenager, young adult, and you're still honing in your own sort of self-confidence, that you would if you did not have a chronic illness or disability. So I didn't know if on that end as well, what sort of conversation tips you might have if you want to engage that conversation as the person with a chronic illness or disability.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. And oftentimes, with Diversability, we often take a very intersectional lens at the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
And so I will show up in a lot of feminist spaces or a lot of women's spaces. And I have more recently been committed to showing up to more AAPI, Asian American spaces as well. And what I think is interesting is sometimes it does cross my mind, like, oh, there goes Tiffany again on her soapbox talking about, how these spaces aren't accessible or they aren't, women friendly or they're exclusive in certain ways. And I wonder, like, wow, when will people get tired of that? But I know the responsibility that I have to, if no one else is saying anything and I have needs that I need to be met, I am the only one who is going to be vocal about knowing my needs, unless I have a really amazing ally. So allies, we need you to ask about accessibility as well. But yeah, I think for me, I used to have this phrase, and I don't want it to come off as pretentious, but it was I used to say, my presence is my advocacy. And I would talk about that in the sense of when my background is in corporate finance. So I worked on Wall Street in a couple different financial roles. And while I was
Props
there,
to you just for that.
And I was involved in disability employee resource groups, and I would often be brought to panels to help recruit more disabled students into internships. And it made me think, I am building my financial models and putting together these PowerPoint presentations, but I'm a disabled person doing these things. Mm-hmm. And signaling to my office environment, to the broader company, maybe to the world, if I want to go that broad, that I can operate in this environment and put together my PowerPoints and my Excel PowerPoints and be disabled. Mm-hmm. And that is important. And so I think about, for teenagers who are showing up in their friend circles, like your presence is acknowledging that you have something. And again, it's your choice if you want to share or if you don't want to share. But I think similar to the conversation you had with the mental health advocate is that the longer that you keep it kind of internal, like if you don't have any outlets, journaling is also an outlet, talking to your family privately is also an outlet. But if you don't have any outlets, those I call them little paper cuts, all the little things that end up happening about every single time you don't advocate for yourself or you feel like you're becoming a burden. Those little paper cuts, a lot of paper cuts in the same place becomes a very large cut, which is actually quite painful. So, and again, we've talked a lot in this conversation about being cognizant of where you are in your journey. But if you have, that close family member or that close friend, or maybe it's a private social media post or sliding into someone's DMs, just at least a little teeny bit of acknowledging the validity of your needs, acknowledge the validity of the things that you need. And I recently did an interview for one of my friend's projects called Disabled in Development. Cool. And she's interviewing a lot of people who are involved, who are disabled and who are involved kind of in the funding and philanthropy world of things. And one thing I wrote about was the internalized ableism that I oftentimes bring into my own environments in order to, maybe I need help at the buffet line, but I don't ask for help. And then I end up not eating because I couldn't serve myself food because there was no space for me to put my plate down and to grab food at the same time. Or, the things that I do to try and make my existence more comfortable to non-disabled people in those environments. Yep. And so I don't know. If I take a step back, I'm like, Tiffany, just have fun with it. You're disabled. You have needs. Ask for what you need help with. Put artwork on your splint. If else is going to be talking about disability, it is another way that we become invisible and you run this organization, InvisiYouth, which is a lot of your community members have invisible disabilities but want to be visible. Yeah. How can we validate as many of our stories as possible? And I think a lot, similar to this Harry Winston quote, which is, people will stare, make it worth their while. I think a lot about how, in a way, I feel like I do have an audience, however small it may be. But now that I have an audience, what am I going to say? Yeah. What am I going to do? And what I have learned is that, and I don't want to make my social, I listened to Ashley Eakin's interview that you did with her, and she's like, my social media isn't only about my disability because my life is so much more than that. And what I find is that, my social media isn't only my disability, but every time I do talk about it, I am raising visibility for this community for a lot of my audience members who are not disabled or who have different disabilities and lives are very different from mine. And so, I am always the biggest proponent of, and again, I have been disabled for more than 20 years. So, and I have been disabled probably longer than many of your audience members. But it's, I think for me, again, it has been a journey. So I did not start telling my disability story until I was in my 20s. Yeah. And the fact that you have teenage members of your community who are curious about that journey for themselves, huge kudos to them. I feel like I didn't have spaces for that. And I think the fact that they are even just a part of your community, whether it's watching these conversations or following you on social media or the other ways you engage your community members, that's you pat on the back for that. I mean, similar to you being like, I went up the stairs today, and sometimes or went up the stairs and I give myself like a mini cheers. Like, all of those little things are like little things to celebrate. Yeah. Like, every single time I show up for therapy, I'm like, I showed up for myself. I mean, even though I paid money for it, but I'm like, that's huge. Like, it took me a long period of time to actually get to a point to say, oh, there's a mental health component to all of the stuff that I've been through that I probably want to work through. So yeah, the fact that any of your audience members are watching this, I give them a huge kudos.
I love that you said that too, that even it is taking that step of your own curiosity is something worth patting yourself on the back for, figuratively or literally, however you choose, because it is, you're actually taking a step to engage your own personal health journey, if you will, and putting it into more of a power statement for yourself, but then also finding the avenues that you are the most comfortable with, as at a young age, and being able to evolve that, as you said, for even yourself, for myself, for so many people that are a part of both of our communities. Life is a journey. If you had no chronic illness or disability, life is a journey. Ours just has that extra fun layer of chronic illness or disability added to it that makes it a little more different at times. So I think that was really, I love that you said that. And then a big thing that I always love to say is trying to always, if somebody wants to ask a question about your chronic illness or disability, or you want to, on your own, find out if things are more inclusive or accessible for you, when you're going into environments, I always say, frame your question with a question that somebody else that would be healthy or able-bodied at those different scenarios would ask. So my big thing I'll always say, if somebody questions why, I'm wondering if there's an elevator going in somewhere, or if I'm able to use a recording app because I have brain fogging, or I need help with something else physically that day, if I'm having cardiac issues, or dietary wise, I need things for different reasons, for neuromuscularly that it affects my gastric, and I'm asking different questions based on what comes up that day with my chronic illnesses as the biggest issue of the list. People will ask, well, why are you asking these sort of things now? Or, oh, isn't this accessible enough for you? I'll always say, well, if you were coming into a conference and everyone was speaking a different language than you, wouldn't you have advocated for yourself and asked for an interpreter that also spoke English or whatever language you needed? And they went, oh, well, of course, I need to understand what's happening. And I said, well, if you're asking for that assistance on something that you think is so human rights level of just being able to function, don't you think that's something I need as well, because I have a chronic illness? And it is sort of that aha moment, because you're using your health scenario and explaining it to them in a scenario they can comprehend as somebody that does not have an illness or disability, because it's in their own in their framework, in their scope of life that they're able to comprehend. They're not trying to associate or think of what it's like in your shoes. They're looking at it in their own framework of life, which I think gives you sort of a power move to ask those questions, but then also allows them to be curious and take a step back and go, oh, I never thought of it that way. And then they're able to actually move forward in life and be more accessible and more diverse in how they interact with people.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, the response is normally, oh, I haven't thought about that, right? Mm-hmm. And I think if we approach asking for our needs or accessibility needs in a way that isn't shaming people that they weren't aware, because the thing is, like, the way our disabilities manifest on our bodies is so different. Yeah. And the way all of us grew up who have similar disabilities is so different. And so, I remember there was a period last year where I was very angry. And when you are involved in actively get angry a lot. And so I'd walk into places and I'd be like, this isn't accessible. Where's the interpreter? How come you didn't think about all these things? But then I was like, how does that make someone feel? And no one wants to feel like someone called them out for something. And instead, how can we co-create something together or do it in a way that isn't like shaming or fearing someone into being an ally or helping us?
Yeah, and I really love that you said that too. And even I want to quickly go into the last segment and kind of even just stay on that note with Tiffany as well, of co-creating that sort of space of being accessible and inclusive and diverse, of us being engaged, and going into our last segment, which is Medically Adultish Guidebook.
Medically Adultish Guidebook.
All right, with the Medically Adultish Guidebook, obviously our fun trademark of being adult-ish, of the young adult community, we want to make sure that we can give different guidebook tips of you thriving and excelling in life with chronic illness and disability, and all the different ways that you can adapt to make things more accessible and be more inclusive for yourself and for the larger community that is with us. So I know you kind of even touched on it beforehand when you were talking, but I know one thing I wanted to ask would be sort of your guidebook tips when you're interacting within the disability space, within people that are in chronic illness and disability like yourself, versus interacting and gaining support from the quote-unquote healthy, non-disabled community that you have around you. And if you feel that there should be ways in a guidebook of how you could expand your own work in both communities differently, from people who understand versus people who aren't living in the same health space as you.
That is a great question. So I think for within the disability community, part of the reason why Diversability is cross-disability is they feel like we're really fragmented by type of disability, type of illness, disease, etc. And an additional layer of that is that many people who are disabled don't self-identify, which is fine. We give people space to identify how they would like. So all of that said, one of the reasons why I created Diversability was because I feel like we tend to have like a scarcity mindset with regard to opportunity, access, etc. And I remember when I first decided that I was going to start Diversability, I reached out to a couple other people who ran disability communities. And I said, hey, I started this Diversability community when I was in college, and here's what we did. Do you think that we could just merge what we're doing into what you're doing? And Alice Wong, who is a fellow disability advocate, responded to me, and she said, Tiffany, I think there's space for everyone. And I just love the way that she said that. Yeah. And it's really how I see a lot of our work. So number one, I see our community as asset-based. Here's what we add to the work.
Yeah, I love that.
And what we're building. How can we create more opportunities for everyone? Because if we create opportunities and access for more people, then it has this, it's like, what is it from the Pay It Forward movie? That has like an amplifier effect.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a ripple effect. Yeah, okay.
I was going to say, the first thing I thought of was like multi-level marketing. I don't want to use that word. But yeah, I think that we and again, the only reason why Diversability exists is because we have advocates and organizations within our community who are doing the work. This is not about me. It's not about you.
Yeah.
I guess it's about both of us. But we're really here to think how can we use our digital presence to elevate our community, elevate your work, my work, whomever, exactly what you're doing with this podcast. How can we better support each other? And so interestingly enough, so next week, sometime in October, because I can't remember when this is airing. So in October, I had the opportunity to participate in 2 different talks. And unfortunately, I'm going to be out of town. And I recommended 4 people for both of them who I think would be really good. And it's how can we do more things like that? Which is, how can we see opportunities come our way that maybe are geographically not convenient for us, or timing wise, and recommend other people who are also doing great work and have diverse disabilities as well. So yeah, I think it's this whole idea of within the disability community, we just really need to support each other and acknowledge that your experience is not my experience, but your experience is equally valid and equally needs to be shared. And the other thing, I oftentimes will get comments that really difficult and thinking about that. And sometimes I'll respond. I was like, well, what do you think disability looks like? And then, there are a lot of other social factors, socioeconomic factors as well that factor into a lot of, I think, what people see as the disability experience. But again, to only allow us that one storyline is to strip us of our humanity. So within the community, lift each other up. And the way I see that is sharing an Instagram post in your Instagram stories is power.
Yep.
It's the way that you're celebrating someone else's work. This morning I shared the Disabled in Development Project blog post and want to shed more light on some of the other disabled people who are working in funding. A comment, all of these things, I call them micro advocacy. They're really small ways for us to show, the person who is being more visible, who is doing the work, that we support what they're doing. Maybe we're not quite there yet. Maybe we're not, posting and being on our soapbox, but at least we're saying, I support you. Yeah. Funny, because how sometimes on Twitter you'll see in people's bios, retweets are not endorsements. The like is an endorsement, but at least it's just a nudge to say, I see you. I acknowledge that this post came through and that I read it and that, it made me react in some way. Yeah. I think to the broader, to the non-disabled community, the one thing I always tell people to do if they're wondering how to get more involved is to follow disabled people on social media or to join our Diversability community and at least see the conversations that are happening. Yeah. So, yesterday I posted something in our Diversability community about a co-working space that wants to be more ADA accessible and wants to work with a disabled person on making that happen or figuring out how exactly to make that happen better. And so these are some of the things that we're getting asked by our non-disabled peers that then proposing within our community. But yeah, I think what ends up happening when you follow more disabled people is that we show up on your feed. Yeah. And when we show up on your feed, it's these subtle ways that, so on our Diversability Facebook page, we'll always post articles about different things that are going on. And maybe you don't click the article, but you see the headline and you start to see more headlines and you start to see, more pictures of how I live or how you live. And I think the visibility of that is such a micro, small thing to do. I mean, if you want to do bigger things, come to Diversability events, get involved with InvisiYouth, meet disabled people, become our friends. And these are actually equal relationships. You're not volunteering for us. I want you to be my friend. Yeah. I want people to be your friends.
No, and I love that.
It's you're not coming here to feel like you're doing good work because what I'm doing doesn't feel good. It's what I need. Yeah. This is what I think that the world needs is I need more disabled and non-disabled people to be friends, to be friends with each other, or at least to be partners, partners who know, etc. And I think, I mentioned before, best way to tackle bias is through these real life continuous experiences with disabled people or anyone who challenges their stereotypes. And even for me, like, I am holding myself more accountable to getting more involved in the American community. So I went onto Instagram and I followed a bunch of Asian American people. And so now I'm seeing things that they're doing. And I'm actually seeing, like, there's a really close-knit community of people of Asian Americans, and a lot of them are kind of like YouTubers or in media and entertainment who are hanging, and they're supporting each other. They're sharing each other's stuff. They're like, shout out to this person, congratulations to this person. And I'm just thinking, how can I do more of that across all of my identities?
Yeah. And I love that you said that too, that micro activism step is really something that those in the chronic illness disability community and our support network both can just sort of steps of even just following, so it's on your page. And I will always say, if you want more diversity in your workspace or in your own life, or to expand your own mindset, the chronic illness disability community is the best one to go to, because it's a large number of people who don't get to be tapped into as a resource. And chronic illness and disability a lot of the times does not care about your gender, your race, your age, your sexual orientation, your geographic location. It's the most diverse group to tap into just from saying, I want more chronic illness disability advocates or individuals in our business framework or our company's framework or our events that we can use, or even in our media campaigns. And I want more diversity, and that tapping in, you have a whole intersectional diverse group of people in the chronic illness and disability community, and you get to show more, which that visibility is key, and it can show in so many different ranges, which I think is, like you said, really kind of end it on that note. It really is sort of showing up for one another and then building that community within each other and having those conversations and visibly seeing it as well is a real key of growing as an individual on your own end.
Yeah. And, one thing I do think about is how can we be more disability centric in all of our work? Because if we really center on disability, we will make everything better for everyone. Like, no matter what line of work you are in, if you center it on disability, it will be better. It will be more accessible. You will open yourself up to more consumer segments. You'll be seen as having more diverse clientele. I mean, it's to me, it's like, if I'm thinking of like Maslow's hierarchy, like my dream is like Maslow's hierarchy is like to start with disability. Yeah. Then you add all the other layers of intersection of identity. But yeah, if I had any message, it would be for our non-disabled friends and even for our disabled friends to really figure out how we can be better allies to each other. Yeah,
I love that. And there we go. That is Tiffany's Drop the Mic. We're ending the episode right on that. I love that. So I want to make sure, because we've talked about your social media and all of your new following now as well, of who you're following. I want to make sure people can not only find you on social media, but also find Diversability and everything that you guys have going on. So tell our listeners and viewers where they can find you and Diversability.
Sure. So I'm Tiffany Yu across social media. So it's the letter I, the letter M, Tiffany. It's my first name, and my last name is spelled YU. And then Diversability, you can also find at Diversability across social media. That's Diversability. It's not a real word, but you'll find us. And yeah, I think follow us. My personal social media is a little bit different from the content that you'll see on Diversability or coming out of Diversability, and which is fine. So yeah, follow both, follow one, totally fine.
I know, I love that. And we're always following Tiffany and Diversability, so you'll definitely find it through us as well. But like always, you can find InvisiYouth on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at InvisiYouth. You can find the InvisiYouth chat sessions on our YouTube channel and where all audio podcasts can be found. So iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Deezer, iHeartRadio, all the above. Make sure you give a thumbs up, like, follow, subscribe, 5 stars, all of the above, comment. and I'm just going to list off everything you can do on social media as well. We love interacting with all of you guys, and we're going to make sure all of the links for Tiffany and Diversability are below so you can easy access find and give them a follow and interact with them too. So I want to make sure we thank Tiffany again. Thank you so much for being on this episode. I've been so excited to have you on the show, and I can't wait to get to bring Diversability more into the InvisiYouth family and get to do some more work with a fellow boss lady like yourself.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, everyone, and we will speak soon. Bye.